Good day. It's JJ MMA. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about the main event slots in the upcoming UFC events that are empty. That I think that these are the fights that we should fill these empty main event slots with. Just give me as a matchmaker already because I think I cooked up some nice ones for this one. Starting off with UFC Baku in Azerbaijan. We're going back to Baku, and I don't know why, but hopefully we get a solid undercard under this. What we got so far is looking pretty decent. We got Bruno Fahea right here and Ikram Aliskerov, pretty decent scrap. Michel Pereira and Shar Magomedov. Shar Magomedov, he's only allowed to fight in Abu Dhabi and around that Middle Eastern range just because of his eye injury. I would like to see him more than once a year, but that's what we get, and it's okay. Asu Almabayev, Charles Johnson. We are all rooting for Charles Johnson in this one. Charles Johnson is going to be the champ. Nah, he's not. But, he got knocked out by Alex Perez. But, he did knock out Joshua Van. He fluked Loner Kavanaugh. I have Charles Johnson winning this one, actually. But, those picks will come later. Abdulrahman Yakiayev right here versus Julius Blobber. Abdulrahman Yakiayev, he's very, very good. I think he has top 5 in the light heavyweight division potential. I do think that he'll win that one pretty easily by submission. Ruzaboyev versus Pulayev. Pulayev did good against Gautier. I think he'll probably do good in this one too. Almakhan versus Matsumoto. We only know Almakhan is the guy who gets masterclassed, but he did fight Alexandre Topuria in his last fight, and Alexandre Topuria is very, very good. But yeah, I think Almakhan is also very good, and this is better matchmaking that they made for him. Excuse me. Yeah, this is better matchmaking that they made for him. So there you go. Almakhan, Matsumoto, I think he wins that one. Now, for the main event. This is the fight that I think should be the clear main event, not Michelle Olix, JJ, Hunter Campbell, if you're listening. This should be the clear-cut main event for UFC Baku. Come on. Why hasn't this fight happened yet? Why haven't we had DDP booked for a fight yet? This is the clear-cut main event that we need to have for UFC Baku. And, this is going to be an interesting fight. Imavov, he's quite good. Imavov is actually very good. He has great pop. He's quick. He can mix in the wrestling. He's Dagestani, even though he says he's from France. His first name's Nasruddin, so I guess he is from France. Anyways, Imavov's, he's good. I think the only reason he didn't get the title shot is because he has absolutely no personality, and Strickland's really good at promoting himself. Now here's the thing, you guys. Strickland, I think that Strickland would beat Imavov again if they had the rematch. But Imavov is still good. He's quick. He's very tappy. He's got good boxing. Good 1-2s. He beat Caio Borralho pretty clearly. I think that the fight that they're going to do is Borralho versus Joe Pyfer on the UFC 330 card in Philly because Joe Pyfer's from Philly. So I don't think that they'll be doing Dricus versus Caio. So, this is the fight to make. And I do think Dricus wins this. And I think Dricus wins this via like a 48-47, 49-46 decision. I don't see him finishing Imavov. Imavov's a tough out. He's tough to finish. The only way I can see him getting a finish is if Dricus falls into a takedown again like he did against Adesanya and maybe gets a rear naked choke. He does have a good rear naked choke. Would have liked to see him finish the rear naked choke against Khamzat. Our boy Dricus, he got fluked against Khamzat. We all know that. Khamzat just laid and prayed, type of riveting stuff that you love to see from a champion in the middleweight division of the UFC. But, it's what we get, so it's all right. Hopefully Strickland flukes him out cold. But, I think Dricus is going to win this one. I think he'll win by decision. I don't see him finishing Imavov. Imavov is actually very good. There you go. Dricus gets it done, I think. But hopefully they can make this one as the main event. Not Michelle Oleksiejczuk again. We move on to UFC 329, International Fight Week. Obviously we've been hearing the rumors that McGregor and the UFC are doing well. However, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I'm not going to believe it until he gets in the cage and the cage door is locked with him and whoever they're going to put him against. I think that if not for McGregor, if McGregor's not the main event, the title fight that you have to put as the main event of UFC 329, and nothing else really makes sense. You got to do this. You got to put Volk versus Movsar. This isn't short notice, but we know that our boy Volk right here, he's willing to take any fight on short notice. He's so tough, even at the age of 37. Really the only guys that beat Volk are the guys that have the potential to knock him out at this point in his career. Diego Lopez, he obviously has really good boxing. He has good power. He's got good finesse on the feet, even though he's kind of a blockhead. He does not move his head at all. He makes up for it with his granite chin, but later in his career, I think that might be exploited. Anyways, a guy like Gene Silva with that type of power, a guy like Kevin Vallejos who's going to put it on you, who's got that Topuria type of striking. He's not really proven yet. Vallejos isn't really proven yet in the grappling. However, I do think that a guy like Vallejos, a guy like Gene Silva are really the only threats to Volk at this point in his career. Obviously we've seen Diego Lopez drop Volk, but Volk does have really good recovery though, and he didn't take much damage in his last fight. Movsar obviously doesn't have the one hitter quitter on the feet. He's got really good chain wrestling. He's able to get to the hips. He's the guy he'll shoot a nice smooth double leg and he'll get you down. He'll get deep on the takedown. But the thing is, Volk's takedown defense is really good. And I know this was 3 years ago that this happened, but him versus Islam Makhachev in the first fight, even a guy like Islam Makhachev, who's bigger than him, who's one of the best wrestlers in UFC history, he was barely able to control him on the ground. There were moments obviously where Islam was able to take him down and control him on the ground, but we kind of expected that. But for the most part, Volk's takedown defense did hold up. Ortega, who's very dangerous on the ground, wasn't able to submit him. He had that fully locked guillotine. Volk didn't go out. Movsar's not really a submission type of guy. Movsar is actually not as boring as people think he is. He's got some good ground and pound. But I don't think Volk's really going to be hurt by that, and I don't think Volk's really going to be in the position to be hurt by that. So I think that when they're on the feet, Volk's going to control him. He's going to be jabbing him up at distance. Mixing a 1-2 here and there. He'll just throw that little lazy jab out there and catch him with the left hook. Volk will control you on the feet like that, and I think he'll do the same thing to Movsar as he's done with guys like Yair Rodriguez, as he's done to guys like Ortega on the feet, Max in the in the third fight. I think this will be a very similar fight, to all those fights. I think that he's going to stuff a lot of Movsar's takedowns, and it's going to surprise a lot of people how good Volk is at this point in his career. I think that Volk could jump on Movsar if he gets tired, and I know Movsar has very good cardio, but so does Volk. I think that Volk could maybe jump on him, get a takedown or something like that, maybe knock Movsar down in round 3 and get a TKO win with ground and pound. Volk's not really that one-hitter quitter guy in the feet, obviously. He's the guy who, if he's going to finish you, it's just going to be a ground and pound TKO, like he did with Chad Mendes, like he did with TKZ, like he did with Yair Rodriguez. I think that it's most likely that this is just going to be a very clear-cut 48-47 decision from Big Volk right here. I see Volk. I don't see a universe where Movsar wins this one, to be honest with you. I feel like there's no real threat to Volk here because Movsar doesn't have that power on the feet. I just think that Volk, whenever it's on the feet, Volk's going to control the round, and he's going to win every round on the feet. And if Movsar gets a takedown or 2 in the round, maybe we could see Movsar controlling Volk, maybe hits him with a few ground and pound shots. But I think this will be a very clear-cut 48-47 decision. There's a chance Volk gets a TKO round 3 or something like that, but I don't think it'll happen. Volk gets it done, I think. Hopefully this fight gets made for International Fight Week if McGregor is not fighting. I think McGregor versus Holloway would be a big mistake for McGregor because, Holloway is the type of guy Holloway's just going to beat McGregor. He's just going to beat up McGregor. We all know that because McGregor spent 4 years out of the game. Leg injury against Poirier when he was fighting. Knocked out or TKO'd by Poirier. Leaned into a right hook from Poirier when they were fighting in the second fight. I just don't think this. Give him Jorge Masvidal or something. Give him somebody who he can beat. I don't want to see another guy who's just going to beat up on McGregor. Okay, yeah, there you go. We move on. Volk gets it done probably if they make this fight. UFC Oklahoma. That's the fight night that they just announced recently. They haven't announced the main event, obviously. They do have like one women's MMA fight on the card. Dione Barboza, I think it is. But I think that there's one main event that you can do right now for UFC Oklahoma because there's not much else you can do. Almost everyone's booked except for, the title holders and guys that are injured. So, the fight that you do, there's no other thing that you do right now with Peyton Talbot because, you gave him Corey Sandhagen, like right here. You give him Corey Sandhagen, which they already did fight, and this is a good scrap. I'll be interested to see who wins this. And then you got my boy Penis on here, Damian Penis. He's a very good prospect. He knocked out Wes Schultz at UFC Mexico at the end of February. We all know Penis is going to explode all over Cesar Almeida. Penis is just going to be so explosive and get the TKO. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. But anyways. Sandhagen versus Batista. I think Mario Batista gets it done. Both these guys have decent grappling, or Mario Batista has really good grappling. Sandhagen has pretty decent grappling still. But yeah, that's the fight that they're doing in the bantamweight division. So there's really nothing that you can do with Peyton Talbot right now besides David Martinez over here. That's the only fight up the rankings that we can think about right now, unless we would give him Umar, which would be a big mistake, I think, because Umar is, we've just given Peyton Talbot so many wrestlers, and not so many wrestlers. We've given like 3 grapplers in a row, and he's dealt with 2 of them, and then obviously Raoni Barcelos was able to control him. But he wants a striker and a guy that can strike. And I know David Martinez does mix it up a little bit with the grappling sometimes, but he's obviously not a true grappler. I think that this is the fight that you fight up the division for Talbot. Martinez isn't really that good. Chito Vera hurt him on the feet in round 3. I just don't think that's a good indicator of, a prospect. I just don't. I don't see Dave Martinez doing really anything in the bantamweight division. I don't think he deserves to be higher up than the 9 spot. The only guy that I could see him beat above him is a guy like Amin Zahabi, who fluked his way to the top of the division. We all know that Sean O'Malley is going to style on him at the UFC White House. So at the White House, we all know that Sean O'Malley is going to add some more to that highlight reel, craft up a TKO against Amin Zahabi, something like that. Maybe a counter strike. Maybe that pull counter that we saw him hit Aljo with. I think something like that could probably happen. Amin Zahabi does kind of just walk forward like this, and shell up. So I could see O'Malley. Yeah, O'Malley's obviously going to beat Zahabi. It's just a matter of what he's going to do to him. But anyways, let me get off that tangent about Amin Zahabi. Peyton Talbot's going to win this one, I think. I do think like David Martinez is pretty good on the feet. He looks really sharp in round 1. He looks really quick. We saw that against Chito Vera. He's chopping the leg kicks. He's real bouncy. He's like I don't know. He's very active on the feet, and he almost gets gassed in round 2 because of it. And that's why he's got to kind of change up his fight style, because he gets gassed when he starts doing all this jumping back and forth really quickly and looking super sharp in round 1 just because he can. Just because he's very agile and very quick. That doesn't mean that you should always be so active on the feet in round 1. So yeah, especially if you're going to get gassed out like that. I don't think David Martinez is going to win this one. I think he'll win round 1 probably, to be honest with you. I think he's going to chop the leg of Payne Talbot. Payne Talbot's striking defense is it's okay. I think that he'll chop the leg of Payne Talbot, maybe get a little welt on his leg. Chop the calf kicks. work the jab a little bit. Nothing crazy is going to happen to Talbot. It's going to be a pretty boring round one. It finishes, and then round two, we get to round two, and then Payne Talbot's just patient. He's staying patient, not really hitting him with much. And then all of a sudden, Dave Martinez just tries to blitz in. Maybe goes for a double leg. And Payne Talbot just catches him with a knee up the middle and puts him out cold. I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to be something like that, some type of counter strike from Talbot, and Talbot's just going to absolutely spark him out cold. And the crowd's going to go crazy. This is in front of a crowd. It's not in the Apex, finally. This is going to be, it's not really an interesting matchup because I think that Payne Talbot, he's just going to, he's going to beat him. But the way that it's interesting is that these are two young prospects, and this isn't just a prospect versus Unk fight like we've been getting, like Josh Emmett versus Kevin Vallejos, like Moicano versus Duncan, even though Moicano won that one, even though, something like Gilbert Burns versus Mike Malott, that's in what universe is that a good main event? How do you not do Gilbert Burns versus Mike Malott, kid? Anyways, had to rip out the Dana impression there, but. Yeah, Payne Talbot gets this one done, I think. I think this is, really the only main event that you could make happen for UFC Oklahoma. Unless they swap the next main event for this one, which wouldn't really make sense considering the location. UFC Oklahoma, it's basically just going to be like a UFC Texas card, like a UFC Houston. You put guys in the undercard, like, not a Derek Lewis because he's on the White House lawn, never mind. Yeah, he's fighting Josh Oka, and I think Josh Oka's going to absolutely style on him. But we'll leave that for a White House prediction video. But yeah, Payne Talbot, I think he doesn't style on David Martinez. I think David Martinez is going to win round one, and then Payne Talbot's going to catch him, spark him out cold. David Martinez is going to be dead on the canvas. Yeah, and Payne Talbot gets it done if they make this happen. We move on. UFC Abu Dhabi has been announced for July 25th. This was recently announced. My source is The Real Kevin K on Instagram. And yeah, the UFC just announced UFC Abu Dhabi for July 25th. And I think that there's one main event there's a few main events that you could do, but time-wise, this is what makes the most sense. And ranking-wise, this is what makes the most sense. And based off of rumors that I've heard, this makes the most sense. Michael Morales versus Kamaru Usman. And man, this is a good fight. This is honestly a very good fight. This is very interesting. What'll be the most interesting to see is if Usman can keep up the performance at 40 years of age. The man's 40 years of age, yeah. Had to rip out the McGregor impression. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Kamaru Usman can pull off the performance that he did against Joaquin Buckley, good with the wrestling, he looked decent on the feet. It'll be very interesting to see if Kamaru Usman can perform well against a young buck like Michael Morales, a guy who's very big for the division like Michael Morales. Usman is also quite big for the division. Usman is a borderline middleweight, but, Michael Morales is a natural light heavyweight. Michael Morales is weighing the same as Yuri is on fight week. Not on fight week, the day after the fight. This guy, Michael Morales is a light heavyweight, and he's at welterweight. So I think that's gonna play a factor in a lot of his fights. And if he puts his hands on Usman, on old man Usman, I think Usman's gonna go out cold. I think maybe not cold. He's gonna go out like Sean Brady did. He's just gonna wilt to the combos that Michael Morales is gonna be throwing at him. And it's just gonna be a Morales domination on the feet. So Usman has to get the takedown. We saw Gilbert Burns get a takedown on Michael Morales. He usually does get the double leg takedowns. Malak did a good job shucking off the takedowns on Gilbert Burns. But it'll just be interesting to see if Usman can take him down. I think that's the big factor in this fight, is whether or not Usman can control him on the ground, he can get him down. But at the same time, every fight starts on the feet, or every round starts on the feet. And I just think that on the feet, Morales just has such an advantage over Usman that eventually Morales is going to put together a combo that puts out Usman. And, it's just inevitable. It would be nice to see Usman versus Islam, but, if Morales wins this one by a knockout or a TKO, I think Usman's got to hang it up or move up to the middleweight division. Those are the really only things he can do right now because there's not many killers at middleweight that are looking to get him. Um, you know, those are really that's really the two-way path that he can go on in his career after if he loses to Michael Morales. It's either you retire or you move up to middleweight. Because he is a quite big welterweight. I'll mention again, but yeah, I think Morales just has the youth advantage, the speed advantage, the power advantage. I think Usman will get him down in round 1 just like Gilbert Burns did, and I think he'll control him in round 1, but I do think at the start of round 2, Morales is going to put together a combo, like a 6-3-2 or something like that, and he'll find a way to get Usman out, and then he'll just jump on him, ground and pound. Usman's going to be kind of defenseless. Maybe he'll grab onto an ankle, and he's going to fail it. Mostly, yeah, I mean, anybody who's wobbled, like we've seen it with Ankalaev, getting wobbled by Pereira, wrestling, and it just doesn't work just because everything's not going well up there. So I think that we'll see Morales get the TKO like probably 30 seconds into round 2. I think this is going to be a Morales masterclass, and he'll be next up for the title after this, as long as Topuria doesn't move up to welterweight, which I think the only reason Topuria would move up to welterweight is just to fight Islam, and then he'd be done with welterweight. He just wants to chase Islam because he's just such a killer, and we'll talk about that matchup eventually, but yeah, we move on. So UFC 330 in Philly, I think there's going to be 2 title fights on this card. I think they'll do probably Kayla Harrison, Amanda Nunes as the co-main of this. I would favor Kayla Harrison in that one. Just too good at wrestling, younger, not terrible on the feet. But, I think that the main event of this one, there's nothing else you can really do unless you want to do Merab versus Jan. But I don't think either guy will be ready at that time. And if they are, I think that would be a co-main event to this fight. But, this is already in the works. This fight is already in the works, and, I think that this is Ian Gary deserves it over Michael Morales. And Michael Morales is, from rumors that I heard yesterday, is already out of the title picture at the moment, and he'll be taking a contender matchup. That's what he signed at the UFC PI, and I think it will be Usman that he's going to be fighting. I think this is the fight that you make. There's a chance that they do Gary versus Morales and Makhachev versus Usman. And that, honestly, Makhachev versus Usman would be more interesting to me than Morales versus Usman. I think Morales has a higher chance of beating Usman than Makhachev does. But I would still favor Makhachev in that one. But, this is a very interesting fight. I think that Makhachev gets it done. I think Makhachev's going to submit Ian Gary. I think that Ian Gary will have some moments at the start of round 3, just kind of like Dustin Poirier did. And then Makhachev's going to get him down, ankle pick, and Darce choke. And, we all know Islam's really good at that Darce. I think Islam will get a finish this time around. There will be a boring round, either round 1 or round 2, where Makhachev just gets Ian Gary down and controls him. I don't care how much Ian Gary's been training in Georgia. None of the wrestling from Ian Gary, none of the defensive wrestling is going to work on Islam Makhachev. I just think that Islam is going to win this one. And, Islam is going to win this one via submission round 3. This is the fight to make. This is the fight that's been rumored. Ian Gary's beat Bilal. He's beat Carlos Prates. He's beaten MVP. Ian Gary has a better resume right now than Morales does. His best win is Sean Brady, which is still a good win. But Ian Gary did beat Bilal, who TKO'd Sean Brady on the feet, actually. I just think, Ian Gary's the most deserving contender. Love him or hate him. I don't like Ian Gary personally. But, I think this is the fight to make. Ian Gary, he's got good striking. He's got some finesse on the feet. He's really rangy. He's 6'3". He was able to keep Prates at range, with the kicks. He's got very good kickboxing, really sharp, really fast for welterweight, might I mention. Very fast for welterweight. I think Ian Gary gives a lot of guys in the division problems. based on matchups, I think that like guys that he can beat are guys that are like shorter guys. Except for JDM, I think JDM can maybe get inside and box with him and maybe get a TKO. But yeah, this is the fight to make. As of the undercard, I think that Kayla Harrison co-main event. That's probably what they're gonna do. I think they're gonna save Shevchenko for an Abu Dhabi pay-per-view later in the year, probably an October Abu Dhabi pay-per-view. And the undercard, yeah, they're gonna have probably Kyle versus Joe Pyfer, some welterweight fight. They might do like an Uros Medic versus a Mike Malott, or something like that, because Mike Malott is from Cleveland, which is relatively close to Philly. They'll do guys around there. Maybe they'll put Sean Brady on the card. It would be kind of a quick turnaround it's not too quick of a turnaround. It depends how his fight against Buckley goes. If he gets knocked out, then he's not going to be on the Philly card. But if he can just control Buckley or submit Buckley, then we'll talk about that one in a few weeks. But yeah, it depends how Sean Brady's fight goes. But I might put him. I would put him on this card if he wins for sure. But yeah, there you go. Those are the fights that I think that we should put in the main event slots in the upcoming cards. Yeah, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Tune in to the live stream later. We're going live around 5 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. I think it's 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific. Like and subscribe. I'll see you later. Goodbye.